Coach Cam from HTL back again. We've got three more teams to go over today in the ACC. Should be this episode and then one more, which will have four teams in it. And I looked, and unfortunately, the last four teams are not. I don't see a lot of dark horse candidates in there. Today's is pretty good though. There's two like solid teams, and then some garbage at the end. But some pretty good teams to go over. We're going to cover Pittsburgh, SMU, and then Stanford. And then in the final episode before the season starts, we're going to do, I think it's Virginia Tech, Wake, and Syracuse. I think those are the four teams that are remaining to go over. None of those four really jump off the page at me, but still be some good stuff to talk about nonetheless. We'll get that episode out next week. This one, obviously, this week. And then I think I'll have like 2 weeks left until week 0, or at least 1 week. So I'll have to come up with something else content-wise to go over before the season starts. So if you guys have any ideas, anything that you want to hear about as it relates to ACC, or if you want me to cover some NFL stuff before we get into week 0, let me know. And I've got a lot of preview stuff that I've been going over, some notes and things that I've been compiling. So there'll be a lot of content. We just kind of have to decide what we want to do before the season starts. So we'll get into today's, and we'll cover Pittsburgh first. Probably one of the fun surprise teams. Let me pull up the picture that I got. I mean, it's nothing crazy, but I want to make sure that I keep with the theme of sharing the screen. Ooh, I rhymed. There we go. All right, so we'll cover Pitt. That's our team to start. Probably one of the fun surprise teams of last year, at least like the first half of the year. I think they snuck up on a lot of people, and then injuries really took hold, and the wheels definitely fell off. I think they lost. It was either 5 in a row or 6 in a row to end the year. It fell off in a bad fashion. They dealt with some injuries that I just think it was insurmountable how many people got hurt. It's like you get to like mid-tier ACC teams, and so like that top end talent, like the starting talent's generally fairly good if it's a competitive team. But the thing that most of these mid-tier teams lack is depth. So when they have a position group, the starters in a position group go down, they generally don't have anything to back it up to prepare for that. And that's what you saw with Pitt last year. We'll start with quarterback going into 2025 season. They're going to return Eli Holstein, who, I thought he was excellent, to be honest, especially at the start of the year. You could definitely see the arm talent is definitely there. He's super projectable, frame-wise. He fits the bill. He looks the part. He's also going to be in the second year of an offensive system, so he's going to be acclimated, and a year acclimated into the system. I definitely see him taking a good step forward in development. His backup, Nate Yarnell, went in the portal. He's gone. I kind of don't really think that's like a bad thing. Now, that being said, if Holstein goes down, which he did have some injury problems last year, if Holstein goes down, he is a mobile quarterback and tends to get hit a lot. I worry about the depth of that position. But if Holstein's on the field, I think they give themselves a good chance to win more times than not. Move on to running back. This is going to be the Desmond Reed show, like it was last year. He is easily their most explosive player. Put up some good numbers last year. Should do the same this year. He's got 3, I believe, true freshmen backing him up. So he's going to be in line for, barring health, obviously, he'll be in line for an all ACC type of year. He's going to get the ball. He's going to get the ball a lot. And he knows what to do with it when he gets it. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the ACC. So I'm excited for what he puts on tape this year. Wide receiver. Last year, their top pass catcher was Kanata Mumfeld. He's gone to the draft, and so is tight end Gavin Bartholomew. Those are probably their top 2 receivers. They bring back Kenny Johnson, who was technically the number 2 wideout. He had some good games, but kind of gave way to Bartholomew whenever Bartholomew was healthy and feeling good. But he had a couple good games, and he definitely had his moments. They added Kataris Hicks from Louisville, but they didn't, and that kind of addresses like the new number 2. Like Kenny Johnson probably takes over. Maybe Hicks does. Hicks put up some decent numbers at Louisville. He's projectable. You kind of got to see who wins that one. The issue that I have is they didn't really address tight end. So I see them not quite being as dynamic this year. And a lot of the receiving load is going to fall on Desmond Reed, who he is a great pass catcher out of the backfield. So I think a lot of those short yardage targets are going to go to him instead of whoever the tight end would be, unless someone establishes themselves throughout the season. We'll see. Offensive line, every year, Pittsburgh O-line has health problems. Last year was no exception. It may have been worse than normal, to be honest. By the end of the year, they couldn't protect anyone. It was a revolving door of players. They lose Branson Taylor, Ryan Jacoby on the left side. It's the tackle and the guard on the left side. They bring everyone else back, and they add 3 transfers. So on paper, it looks like they have more depth. I just am not. I've been bit too many times watching Pittsburgh O-line and kind of what it becomes towards the end of the year. It might be a believe it when I see it type of scenario, but on paper, you can definitely argue they are better set up for long-term success throughout the course of the year. So I don't think they did a bad job in the portal and in bringing back a lot of their starters. Move to the defensive side of the ball. I would say this is probably the most improved part of their team, and I honestly think it was pretty good last year. Narduzzi's a defensive guy. He liked the team last year. He liked the defensive line last year. He was right. They were pretty good. They only lose Nate Matlack and some backups. They bring in 3 more transfers. Super experienced, considering the guys that they're bringing back that were on the team last year, and then the 3 transfers all had some starting experience. They should be high level again on that side of the ball. The pass rush was good. Between them and the linebackers, the front 7 was actually probably the strongest part of the team, and I think it's going to be good again. So going over to linebacker, these dudes were so nasty last year. Almost all of them come back. They have like a nickname. They're called the Sharks, which is awesome. It's Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, and Braylon Lovelace. Those are the 3. They're nicknamed the Sharks. They lose 1 starter, Brandon George. He's probably their 3rd best, but the other 3 are back. The top 3 he might have been their 4th, but their top 3 come back. Super high level unit. The only issue that could potentially fall into place is if these dudes go down, the depth is borderline non-existent. But if they're healthy and on the field, it is a nasty front 7. DB, so we'll go to the secondary. They are going to lose their shutdown corner, Rylan Gandy, and second team All ACC Donovan McMillan. They added 4 transfers, so they lose kind of like the top end guys. The 2 top end guys were very top end, but they bring in 4 transfers. So what they lose in high end caliber talent, they make up for in depth. So to me, it is more of like a wash. I don't think they really take a step back. I think they almost could end up being better as long as the 4 transfers gel, because injuries are not as much of a concern to me with this skill or with this unit. I think even if a guy goes down, they're set up for sustained success. So I actually really like what they did in the portal. So that's the team. Move on to the schedule. I see somewhat of a repeat of last year, minus them absolutely falling apart at the end of the year. I'm fairly high on these guys. I think they start the year solid. Non-conference, very manageable. Louisville is going to be tough, but it is after a bye week, so I think they actually have a solid chance in that game. The biggest issue I see is the last 3 games that they have. They've got Notre Dame, at Georgia Tech, and Miami back to back to back. But literally the first 9 games are all winnable. So, and their over-under is at 6.5. Like, this is one of the ones where I'm like the most sure of, just because the schedule is so doable. I see every one of their first 9 games as winnable. Does that mean they win all 9? Probably not. They probably lose like 1 or 2 of those, but that still means 7 wins. Even if it goes to them, like from what I see, they'll be disappointed if they're 7-2 after the first 9 games because of the way that their schedule is set up. So I see somewhere around a 7-5 team if they underperform the first 9 games, or a 9-3 team if they if they overperform, and then somewhere in the middle, 8-4. 8-4 is probably the most realistic that I see, but easily a 7-win team, upwards of 9 wins. 9 wins is realistic, maybe not going to happen, but is a realistic possibility. So I have them definitely going over their future total. All right, move on to SMU. I was massively high on these guys last year. Let me change my screen here. Go to my. That was almost in transit. We were very close to in transit on that one. That means we're getting better, fellas. All right, so massively high on these guys last year, and I was rewarded with my belief with a trip to the playoffs. The deservedness of the playoff appearance may be called into question, but like to be honest, they were a top 15 team without a doubt. They were a top 15 team. Top 12, I don't know. That's probably like the borderline part where some people would argue, like maybe Bama was more deserving, whoever it might have been. Even like a Miami could have been more deserving with how they played throughout the season. But I think they were a top 15 team. Kevin Jennings returns this year at quarterback. That's massive news for them. I believe he is the second most dangerous quarterback in the ACC behind Cade Klubnik in terms of throwing and running ability. I have him as an all ACC QB this year, and he should take another step forward in terms of decision-making ability, although his performance against top teams definitely leaves me a little bit wary. Whenever that schedule was manageable, he looked like the best player on the field. When he faced some comp that was higher end, you could see kind of the chinks in the armor, whether it was a mental thing or he just hasn't played at that speed yet, hasn't had to process at that speed, and he just needed to get used to it. That's kind of like what you have to figure out this year with him, because he's going to see it again, and he'll be prepared for it this time. It's just how does he respond? But outside of those top end teams that he may or may not struggle against, I think he's going to be an all ACC quarterback. Move to running back. I'm a little worried about this skill group. A lot of turnover at this position. They lose Brashard Smith, who took over as the most explosive player on the offense for most of the season. They also lose their backup, LJ Johnson, and Derek McFall, who's the number 3. They bring in Chris Johnson from Miami and TJ Harden from UCLA. So both those guys ran. Like, it's not like they were like, sitting. Like, they both have some experience. So the group will be as experienced as it was last year. They don't have a guy that can do what Brashard Smith can do. So I think they take a step back this year in terms of how that group performs. Wide receiver, another area where there's a lot of turnover, but I'm less concerned because these guys didn't really dominate like advertised at throughout the course of the year. Like they ran the ball a lot. Like whether it was Jennings from a running and throwing perspective or what they did on the ground with Brashard Smith, the run game was really where you saw most of their damage. I wasn't as high on the receiver groups last year. I did not like Roderick Daniels at all. I did not. I thought he didn't take care of the ball. I didn't really like him. I think if he got to play in space, he could make a play. But I just don't think he was very consistent. Keyshawn Smith was the other guy who's also very inconsistent. They're both gone. Kelvonte Dixon and Jake Bailey are also gone. Jake Bailey was like their wide receiver too a couple years ago. The main returner that I see is RJ Maryland. He was my favorite pass catcher on the team anyways. He was like their number one guy, in my opinion. He got hurt, and so you couldn't really see that come to fruition throughout the whole year. But he's back and should be healthy. I think that's kind of like your big litmus test is like, how does he look? I'm highest on him. I think he leads the receiving core. I think he ends up being their guy. They also bring back Romello Brinson and Jordan Hudson, who have some experience. They bring in 2 freshmen. So if they stay healthy, they can be if it depends on Maryland. If they all stay healthy, I think the group is as good as it was last year. I think if Maryland goes down, they probably have some issues. Offensive line, this unit, as it was last year, is freaking stacked. They lose, I think he's a third teamer, Justin Osborne, and then Ja'Kai Clark, who is their center. They bring the other 3 starters back. They add Addison Nichols from Arkansas. That is massive, as well as 2 more Power 4 transfers. They are going to be one of the top offensive line units in all of football, bar none. I top 5 for sure, in my opinion. Definitely number 1 in the ACC. Georgia Tech is probably the only one that would make me question that a little bit. But I think Georgia Tech's O-line took a step back, and I think SMU's got even better. Move to the defensive side of the ball. So defensive line, these guys were absolutely disgusting last year. A lot of them, though, were seniors, so there's a lot of turnover here. They're not going to have the 4 starters up front from last year, and 3 backups are also gone. So it's like 7 dudes from the defensive line are gone. In order to combat that, they brought in 8 transfers with varying degrees of experience, almost certainly not enough to overcome what they lost. They will. There's no way they're going to be as elite as they were last year. They're absolutely going to take a step back on this side of the ball, starting with the defensive line. I also think they got worse at linebacker. Kobe Wilson, who is an absolute monster, and Ahmad Walker are both gone along with Kale Sanders. They bring in Zaki Barker. He's from East Carolina, and he was like second team all AAC, I believe. They also bring back Alex Kilgore, who saw some meaningful snaps. He was pretty good. But they are way, way, way worse this year along the front 7. Kobe Wilson's that's massive, and they do not have a replacement lined up for him. I would say the one part of the defense that remains strong was the secondary. I do not like the front 7 at all. I'll say it one more time. But I think the secondary is still good. They lost Brandon Crossley, and Jonathan McGill, who is their top safety, but everyone else is back. They were strong last year overall in this part of their game. I think they're probably going to be a little bit better just because most of their guys are back and they're all a little bit more experienced, and I thought they did a good job last year. So as long as they keep the same tendencies on defense, you're just relying on more experience with just about the same amount of talent. I think they either stay the same, which was good, or they take a small step forward. So moving on to their schedule. That's the team. Move to the schedule. I am not as high as I was on them last year. They lost 14 starters from last year. Rhett Lashley, the head coach, hit the portal pretty hard, especially on the defensive side of the ball. He didn't really have a choice, like he had to. But you never know how easily the new guys are going to mesh. You can ask Florida State about that. I am fairly positive there's going to be some growing pains, especially at the start of the year. So like in last year, they had a lot of returners and still struggled out the gate. So it's like now it's like they're kind of historically a slow starting team. Now they're a slow starting team with a lot of questions at a lot of position groups. Luckily for them, the non-conference schedule is like fairly easy to open the year. But they don't miss Clemson, Miami, or Louisville. The rest of the schedule is fairly manageable. Like their other road games are like Cal, Boston College, and Wake. Like those are all like super easy road games. Boston College did play them well last year, so like I would keep that in mind. And that was at SMU, and I actually like Boston College this year. So like maybe trap game. I don't know. We'll have to cover that one when we get to that week. The over under for them is 8.5 this year. I do not think they are as good as the top 3 teams in the ACC, and I also see them losing at least one of the non-conference games. So I have them at 8 wins and taking a step back from last year, although they are still a competitive team. A lot of the experts have them as like finishing 2nd or 3rd behind Miami. I actually think they finished probably like 4th. 8-4 is still a fine year, but I think they take a step back from last year. Last one for today, we're going to cover Stanford. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on this one. This is you can find ways to like, maybe be excited or like, you find some, I don't know. The one thing they got going for them is like no one respects them. But I'll go ahead and start, and hopefully this one doesn't take too long. I'm trying not to have a this season is over before it started kind of mindset with these guys. They're not good as it is, and they also had a lot of coaching drama. So they're starting the season with an interim head coach, which for me is like all I needed to know. Like if you're starting the season with an interim, it just doesn't bode well. The good news is the interim is Frank Reich, who was a pro coach for like 5 years, had some good years with the Colts, so it could be worse. He's just kind of taking over like a tough drama-filled situation. So I feel kind of bad for him, but if, someone could handle it, it would be a guy with his caliber. So they picked a good interim, one of the best possible interims they could have picked. We'll start at quarterback. At quarterback, everybody's gone. No Ashton Daniels, no Justin Lamson. Might not be a bad thing. Neither of them really played that well. Elijah Brown, I believe, is probably going to be the starter, most likely. He is a redshirt freshman, so the growing pains are going to be real from this standpoint. I'm not super high on him, and he's young and inexperienced. Other potential starters, I'm actually higher on some of these guys. It just kind of depends on the direction they want to go. If they're in like a win now mode, maybe they protect Elijah a little bit. They could go with Dylan Risk from UCF or Ben Goldbrinson from Oregon State. Goldbrinson actually had some success there a couple years ago. I don't think he started last year, but I think it was like 23 maybe or 22. Like he actually had some like decent success, and he has starting experience. Maybe they go that route. My money right now is on Elijah Brown, but that is just like it could so go any direction. But I don't necessarily think any direction they go is going to lead to like more or less wins. It's just like the manner in which they want to compete in these games. Like, do they want the growing pains? Do they want the experience? Or do they want to try to be in like a little bit more let's compete right now kind of mode? And that'll dictate who they go with at quarterback. I think all of those guys start at some point during the year, at least two of the three. But I think all of them start at some point. You'll see kind of like a revolving door, which is never good. It's never worked. Running back. I don't mind this group. They had a super young running back room last year, all freshmen who were undersized. They all came back. They're going to be bigger and stronger. Micah Ford probably leads the charge here. He had a couple decent games before getting hurt. He didn't have an O-line to protect him, so like a lot of these guys got hurt. I think these guys will be better, though. Like, I'm actually pretty high on Micah Ford. I think they've got good running backs overall. They were just young last year. I think they actually get better. Wide receiver, Eli Ayamanor was the guy last year. He is gone, and pretty much so is the rest of the receiver room. They add C.J. Williams from USC and David Pantelis from Yale. I don't know how much that helps. They also bring in a true freshman they're pretty high on in John Anthony Hall. They were not that good last year. They will not be as good as they were last year. I am almost positive. I think they took a step back. And the questions at quarterback don't help either. Offensive line is a very tough group to gauge because they shuffled around so much trying to find the right fits. They had like 10 different dudes that they rotated in and out. All of them were too small. All of them were too slow. All of them were too young. All of them were not experienced enough. They lose Luke Blenko, Jake Makula, and Levi Rogers, who all started some. Not every game, but a lot of people started some. They bring back another 3 starters and add 3 transfers who were starters at UCLA and Sacramento State. So a lot more experience, I think, whether it's bringing back the starters from last year or these transfers that all had starting experience. They should be better here than they were last year. But they were not good at all last year. So being better does not necessarily dictate that they will be good. It just means they will be more competitive in how they lose. Defensive side of the ball, defensive line. These guys weren't terrible last year. Mostly the secondary was the problem. But they lose Tobin Phillips, who was one of their better linemen. Everyone else, I think, comes back, though. They're still young. The team as a whole is still young. So there's going to be some more growing pains, but they really should take a step forward in some areas, even if they don't compete yet. Like, I'm of the mind that this is like still a year away. They can they can establish some building blocks, and if they put the right pieces in place, I think like you'll get halfway through the season and you'll start to see them kind of take a small step forward in terms of competitiveness. It could also be like, this happened to like Mississippi State last year, where it's like they start 1-7, and then teams start to like kind of view them as a bye week, and then that's when they sneak up on other teams and win some games. I think they actually did that last year against Louisville. They just don't get a lot. They're not going to get a lot of respect, and they're going to continue to get better, and that's when they can kind of sneak up on a team or two towards the back half of the year. I think defensive line is where you're going to see them take one of those steps forward. Running back as well as the other one. I think O-line too, honestly. Linebacker, though, they are absolutely not going to be as good here. Tristan Sinclair and Gathan Benedal are gone, who are the two top tacklers on the team, and they didn't tackle well last year. They had 2 transfers from Cal and Idaho, but I think they lost too much, and I think they're going to struggle. Tackling was an issue, and they lost 2 of their better tacklers, added some they've got some people returning that didn't tackle well, and then adding 2 transfers, which are kind of question marks. I think they struggle in that aspect of the ball. Secondary, this group was awful last year. Injuries did not help. They had no depth. But regardless, they were the 122nd best secondary in the nation. There's 134 teams at the time of that. So there was 12 teams that were worse than them. That's not good. They have 4 returning starters and almost have no choice but to improve a little bit as long as they stay somewhat healthy. Like, that was the biggest thing, is the lack of health and the lack of depth. A lot of ACC teams kind of have that, especially along the secondary. You'll have your top guys. Their top guys were also not good. But then their top guys got hurt, and then it's the depth. Once the depth gets called into question, these like lower mid-tier teams, they really tend to struggle. If they stay healthy, they will be better than 122nd. You have my word. They might get to like the top 100 maybe. They still won't be good. So schedule, on the bright side, they have 14 returning starters. So like SMU has 14 starters leaving. These guys are bringing 14 starters back. The schedule is awful in terms of who they're playing and the travel. The travel's like 2,700 miles or something. I mean, it's awful. It's like they said it was like the circumference of the earth, or whatever it was. It's like bigger than the circumference of the earth is how much they have to travel. I also think the distractions before the season starting with the former head coach are going to loom large, at least at first. They have the 10th hardest schedule in football preseason rankings. Kind of like last year. They had like the 9th or 10th hardest schedule, and they had 3 wins last year. If you're going to root for these guys, like, the narrative has to be no one's taking them seriously after last year and what they have going on this year, so they can sneak up on a few teams and probably be competitive in more games than they were last year. They can beat Cal at home. They competed against Cal last year. I think they can do that again. San Jose State, they'll compete against maybe Hawaii. I don't see any other wins. Under 3.5 is my prediction. That is it for today. Just 3 teams. Next week will be the last one. We're going to cover the last 4 teams. As always, I appreciate you guys listening and watching. These are fun to do. I love the preseason stuff. Like, I love kind of like testing my merit and just see how I do, how I stack up by the end of the year. These are fun. As I said before, like, we'll probably have like another week of content to go before the season actually starts. And like that week when it starts, I'll do it'll be like a pretty standard like preview episodes of, whatever ACC games are coming out. And then the following weeks is, we'll have week 1 for football pro football starting. So then it'll be a lot of previews for like, the weekend games coming up. But we'll have another week before that starts where we can do some more preview stuff before, some preseason, predictions and things. So let me know in the comments, what do you guys want to hear about, if anything. Otherwise, I'll come up with something. I always do. Appreciate you guys watching and listening, and I will see you all next time.